I got to know Abby when she started volunteering for Planned Parenthood, and then we both eventually worked and then led opposing organizations.
I didn't get involved thinking, I'm going to help provide abortion services or anything like that. It really was under the guise of helping women.
Welcome everyone to tonight's special Life on Film presentation of Unplanned Friendship featuring Abby Johnson and Shawn Carney. My name is Matthew Wojciechowski. I'm the VP of Campaign Life Coalition, and I'm joined today by my colleague Ruth Robert, all the way from St. John's, Newfoundland. Ruth, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's nice that it's finally warming up here.
Nice. Well, it's been about 5 weeks since the National March for Life. I can't believe what we were able to accomplish and all the thousands of people who showed up to the week-long event, really, because it starts from Tuesday and goes all the way till Friday with the Youth Summit. What are some of your thoughts, Ruth? You traveled to Ottawa. You took part in some of the events. You were a speaker at the Candlelight Vigil. You spoke at the Rose Dinner as well. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But what are some of your takeaways from your experience this year at the National March for Life?
Well, this year was the first year my mother was able to attend with me. And it felt very vindicating because she confirmed what I've always said, that the best part of the March for Life is you get to meet all the best people. So my mom, she deliberately held a sign that said, "You are not alone," she said, because when she came to the march, she no longer felt alone as a pro-life person in Canada. And that's really the highlight of the March for Life, is everyone you meet is pro-life, and you realize actually there are a lot of people who do think human life is valuable from the very beginning, and that love should be unconditional.
Yeah, and that's really like the impression a lot of people have when they come home, and they tell us. And even my first marches, I remember coming back home and being like, wow, like I cannot believe there are so many people like me in Canada, right? And especially when we hear from the young people, that's the first thing they say. I can't believe there are so many young pro-lifers. I'm not alone. I'm gonna go back to my school, try to start a pro-life club, do whatever I can, because now I've been encouraged and I know that there's a lot of people out there doing what I'm trying to do. And that's super motivational. It's inspiring. And it's really one of the reasons why we march. Obviously, we march for an end to abortion. It is a protest against the fact that there is no legal protection for children in the womb here in Canada. So that's the reason why we march. But there's a secondary reason. That is just, we also march for ourselves, in the sense that we get to kind of fill up that cup of being motivated and inspired, and have that energy kind of brought back to us so that we can go and be active throughout the year back home in our communities. And that's why so many people march, and they love the March for Life. And Ruth, you didn't just go to the National March for Life in Ottawa, but you flew back out east to the East Coast within a few weeks, right after you organized and took part.
Not even within a few weeks, Matt, within days.
Within days, that's right.
Yes.
And then you took part organizing the Marches for Life in Nova Scotia and in Newfoundland. So tell us a little bit about your experience of organizing and kind of running the show with some of your volunteers and other CLC supporters on the East Coast.
Well, what you were speaking about earlier, Matt, about how encouraging it is to see young people. In Nova Scotia this year, we successfully held our first youth summit. And so I was texting different people I knew from my time as a university student in Nova Scotia, or people I know through the internship with CLC, saying, "Oh, by the way, if you're in Nova Scotia at this time, you should come." And they would text back and say, "Wait, there's enough people like me? I can go to this event? You mean there's other young people?" Yes, there were. And some of them drove from several hours away. And they came to this event, and it was just amazing to see it. And we think it's going to be even bigger next year, because more and more people are hearing about it and thought, "Wait, I didn't know there was a youth summit," or "Gosh, I was busy that day, but next year, let me know and I'll come." So that was very encouraging. And as for Newfoundland and Labrador, we managed to get double the numbers we got last year. And because of counter protesters, we very quickly chose a new location. Instead of Confederation Building, we went to City Hall. And at first, I was a bit grumpy about this. I said, like, God, I was so careful. I can't believe we got counter protesters. And then God, he was saying, I told you so. Like, I always have a plan. He's got the world in his hands. We go down to City Hall, and what you know? There's a pro-abortion, pro-LGBTQ plus event happening at City Hall. And we were there to meet them. So it all worked out quite well. It was quite encouraging in that regard.
Yeah, there's a lot of work we got to do on the East Coast for sure when it comes to the pro-life issue. But I feel like what you did and what your team was able to do in Halifax, in St. John's, I think you guys were planting a lot of seeds. And I think going forward, once more people find out that it's happening, more youth get involved, who knows, we might be pulling in thousands of people on in Halifax one day or in St. John's. And
well, we know it's possible. It's happened before.
That's it. That's right. And there was also the first ever March for Life in Quebec City, that took place on June 1st as well. And there were a few thousands of pro-lifers out there, and our friends at Campaign Quebec V did an amazing job in organizing that March for Life. So marches are spreading all across the country. During the National March for Life Week, there was also marches on the West Coast, in BC, in Alberta. So things are moving in the right direction. And but let's not talk too much about the March for Life, because we are here tonight to present a screening of this amazing program that we put on at this year's Rose Dinner. And what we ended up doing is we had Abby Johnson, who is a former Planned Parenthood clinic director turned pro-life activist. She's an author. If you've seen the movie Unplanned, then you know exactly who we're talking about. And then we also had Shawn Carney, who's one of the co-founders of 40 Days for Life. So the two of them traveled to Ottawa this year, and we had the two of them sit up on stage and have a conversation about their unlikely friendship and their journeys and what they've been up to. And the cool thing is, Ruth, you were there too on stage with them as the moderator
Yes.
for that discussion. So before we get to the tonight's screening, tell us a little bit about that experience of what it was like to sit there on the stage with Abby and Shawn, to ask them the questions, to kind of get the conversation going.
Well, it was incredible because I began my pro-life career doing 40 Days for Life. And when I started out, like, I read Shawn's books and I read Abby's book, and they were really encouraging, or they taught me a lot. And I took what I learned and I tried to bring it out on the street. And I never thought I would be where I am right now. So to be moderating, asking them questions about their unlikely friendship and how they built up 40 Days for Life, or why they joined Planned Parenthood and why they left Planned Parenthood, to be able to do that in person was like, it's hard to describe. It's not so much coming full circle. It's like God brings you places beyond what you can imagine. For me, it was very awe-inspiring in that regard. I got to meet the people who brought me into the pro-life movement, really.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you got to do it in front of 800 people.
Well, yes.
Yeah, so that was a bit nerve-wracking, yes. I can assume.
What about you, Matt? You were there coaching me.
Well, I mean, the Rose Dinners, it's such an amazing event. And if you haven't been to the Rose Dinner, I really encourage you to go next year. But it's just such a wonderful evening of kind of celebrating life. It's an evening of fellowship with other like-minded people. It's an evening where you can obviously eat good food and have great company and network and listen to some inspiring talks. And this year, one of those talks came from Abby and Shawn and yourself, Ruth. And we decided to package the whole keynote address into this program, which is called Unplanned Friendship with Abby and Shawn. So it's about an hour long, and but man, oh man, there are some amazing sound bites here. And some of the things that Abby says about her journey and her experience, things that are on the inside of the abortion industry that most people don't know anything about.
Some of what Abby said is, I would like I've been in the pro-life movement a long time, reading all of her stuff when it comes out. And what she talked about in the Rose Dinner are things that I don't think she's really fully discussed in any of her books that I've read so far. She's hinted at them, but it's quite interesting. She talks about how Planned Parenthood hooks you in and how you can get unhooked and how pro-lifers can help with that, which I thought was marvelous to be able to hear in person.
Yeah, and even Shawn talking about his experiences meeting Abby for the first time when she was still working for Planned Parenthood, and just the role that his wife had on her life, right? And how it's all connected, and it was just beautiful to see really the Holy Spirit in action. Their story, their relationship is just one that it inspired the film Unplanned, and it's inspired Abby Johnson's. She founded, and then there were none, which is a ministry helping abortion workers leave that industry. And now she has this other movie called Unthinkable coming out, which is also a pretty amazing movie. So a lot to unpack here, but we're not going to talk any longer. Let's get to the movie. Let's get to this film, or this production rather, of Unplanned Friendship with Abby Johnson and Shawn Carney, featuring our very own Ruth Robert as the moderator for the evening. We hope you enjoy the show, and we'll see you back in an hour.
Well, you are much loved in Canada. There we go. Yes. And you two have an incredible friendship, but it didn't really begin that way, I think. For those, in case there's anyone here after that round of applause who still is unaware, Abby and Shawn, when they met, Shawn was a pro-life activist, and Abby was a director of Planned Parenthood. So let's start there. Let's not give too much away, but let's start with, how did you get into these positions? Start with you, Abby. How did you become director of Planned Parenthood?
Well, I got involved with Planned Parenthood. I was young. I was 21 and in college, and didn't really know much about I didn't know anything about the organization, but just got involved. It really, I was very ignorant about the organization, just in the purest sense of the word, just very ignorant, and got involved believing that I was helping women. I didn't get involved thinking, I'm going to help provide abortion services or anything like that. It really was under the guise of helping women. And then I graduated college, went on to get my master's degree, and just kept rising up through the ranks. I think one thing that a lot of people don't really think of, we talk a lot in the pro-life movement about the predatory nature of the abortion industry in the way that they reach out and obtain clients. So we talk a lot about, in the United States, 79% of abortion facilities are put in minority neighborhoods, primarily Black neighborhoods. We talk a lot about that. And we talk a lot about Margaret Sanger and the way that Planned Parenthood was founded, and that she believed in eugenics and all of that. We talk a lot about that. But what we don't talk about a lot is that they do the same thing when they are trying to recruit employees. And so 70%, what we know to be true through our own ministry, and then there were none, is that about 70% of those who work in the abortion industry have also had abortions themselves. So a lot of the people that have come through our ministry, they were actually recruited to work for the abortion clinic while they were lying on the abortion clinic table having their abortion. So while they were having their abortion, or while they were in the recovery room, someone with the abortion clinic said, "I don't know if you need a job, but we're hiring." And so there is this predatory nature, not just in their clientele, but also with their recruiting for staff, for volunteers. And so for me, when they saw me, they saw someone who was, number one, white, who was educated, who was articulate, and who came from a upper middle class family. That is who is at the top of Planned Parenthood. It's white, well-educated women. That's who's at the top of Planned Parenthood. But the people who are working day to day, they're daily, hourly workers, these are women who are typically uneducated. They are minority women. They may or may not even have a high school diploma. They may or may not have a GED. These are women who are primarily single mothers. They are desperately looking for a well-paying job. And then here comes the abortion clinic saying, don't worry, we will pay you a wage that you will never make working anywhere else. And we'll train you right here in our facility, working essentially as a nurse. But you don't have the credentials of a nurse. And they get them hooked on a lifestyle. They get them in an apartment that they could not afford working anywhere else. They get them into a car payment that they could not afford working anywhere else. And then they send them to the back where they start helping perform abortions. They send them to the back where they start piecing babies back together in the POC lab. And then the workers start to see, oh my gosh, I'm actually participating in something heinous. I'm participating in something illegal. I'm participating in something that's demonic. But then the workers feel trapped. And they're like, but I can't leave because I have this mortgage payment. I can't leave because I have this apartment rent payment that I couldn't afford working at Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or Tim Hortons or whatever. And so then they're stuck. And, or they're single moms. They're not getting child support. They're not getting help from the father, whatever it may be. And then these women feel trapped. And I have to tell you, it's really heartbreaking when we have women call us on our hotline and they say, I know what I'm doing is evil. I know what I'm doing is wrong. And I know that if I died today, I would probably go to hell. But for the first time in my life, my children have health insurance. And my child is disabled. And I've never been able to take them to the doctor before. And they're finally getting the health care they need. Because Planned Parenthood provides great benefits. And they say, so if I have to go to hell in order for my child to get the health care they need, then I guess that's what I'm going to have to do. And so when I left Planned Parenthood, I realized that we had to provide some sort of stopgap. We had to provide some sort of support, some sort of safety net for these women and men so that we can say, you don't have to sacrifice your soul to provide for your family, because that's not what God wants for you either. He wants wholeness and he wants health, not just for you, but for your whole family. And honestly, that's when I left Planned Parenthood. I mean, that's what Shawn and David B. Wright, and that's what their group was able to help me with too.
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves yet, Abby. Don't give the whole story away.
It was scary to leave, because when you leave, you're leaving everything behind. And so to be able to have someone that says you're not going to be alone on your journey, I mean, that means everything.
Was that how you felt in Planned Parenthood? Would you describe yourself as being someone who knew what you were doing was evil, but justified it because of your circumstances? Or were you someone who wholeheartedly believed in the cause and needed something to jolt you out of that into reality?
No, I would say, when I first started working at Planned Parenthood, I would say I was a person that really was pro-choice. I would say I was a person who was like, I don't think abortion is probably best in most situations. I would say I really was trying to help women choose other options when I first started working there. But as you continue to work in an evil environment and in this demonic environment, and that really is what abortion is, evil really does begin to take over your life and begin to take over your heart. And it really does, your heart begins to become hardened and really callous. And so over the years, I moved away from believing that, let me help provide a different choice for women or whatever. I really did become someone who was pro-abortion. I really did become someone who, thought, well, abortion for any reason is a good reason. And so if a woman came in and she was poor, then I believed she should get an abortion. If a woman came in and she was young, a teenager, I believed she should get an abortion. If she was a single mom, I believed she should get an abortion. If she was in college, I believed she should get an abortion. So you really move from, going into the industry with good intentions to really believing that abortion for any reason is a good reason and pushing abortion on the women who are coming into your facility.
Now, you've mentioned, really explicitly described how Planned Parenthood really preys upon vulnerable women, and that's how they even not just get abortions, but recruit staff members. In what ways would you say you were vulnerable, and how could we protect our own loved ones from ever falling prey to that?
So my ignorance made me very vulnerable. Just my sheer ignorance about abortion. I grew up in a conservative home, but we didn't talk about abortion. We didn't sit around at the dinner table and talk about abortion. I didn't go to things like this when I was, in high school or whatever. It was just something that, it was a different time, I think, too. We grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there wasn't anyone standing up at a podium and shouting their abortion, right? Gloria Steinem had, not yet gone on the cover of a magazine and worn the shirt that said, "I've had an abortion," right? It was a different time. People were not proud of their sin. So people were committing sins, but they weren't like waving a flag about it, right? Now it's a different time. And so people are very proud of the sins they commit, and they want to show everybody when they commit a sin. And so people were just very quiet about it. And so we didn't talk about it in my church. I didn't know anything about abortion. That is the perfect candidate for Planned Parenthood, because they want to take this very vulnerable mind, this very naive mind, and they want to mold it and shape it into a mind that they create. And they want to put their talking points and their, facts as they see them into that vulnerable, impressionable mind. And that's really what they did with me. Your turn now. You get a turn.
I was just about to go over to you, Shawn. It's a perfect segue.
I was going to eat dessert.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really need you up there.
I don't. Can I go?
Just leave all the talking to you.
It's fine.
But how did you get involved in the pro-life movement? Because you actually founded 40 Days for Life, which, as we're going to learn, was instrumental in your conversion, Abby. But how did all that start, Shawn? Why get involved, and why start 40 Days for Life?
Well, I was with David B. Wright, who she mentioned. We did the first campaign in 2004 and then launched it nationally in 2007. But for me, I think it was rather uneventful. I had a really perfect experience as a young Catholic. I'm from Tyler, Texas. I'm from East Texas. Yes?
Everybody knows Bishop Strickland.
Of course, Tyler's very popular in Canada. So Bishop Strickland was my pastor growing up.
That's it. It's not about you.
I feel like and he's here. No, that would have been great. But we were a missionary diocese. It was 2% Catholic. Strickland actually got it all the way up to 6 today, which is great. And I'm related to most of the Catholics in Tyler. I think that's true. And so we were a missionary diocese. We had great Irish priests. We had great Nigerians. Tyler's very conservative. Our abortion facility had closed like when I was in kindergarten. So it was just a really great experience. And then ironically, when I was in the 8th grade, I heard a former abortion worker, Carol Everett, speak. And then my sophomore year, I heard Dr. Tony Levantino speak in Longview, Texas. And so I was very convicted. I was discerning the priesthood in high school. So I was very convicted on the pro-life issue. But it wasn't until I met my girlfriend, eventual wife, when I went to A&M, and she would go out and peacefully pray at our local Planned Parenthood. I had never really done that before. I wasn't super excited about that. I was super excited about her, which is our current system today. And it really, it just broke my heart on a very simple level. I don't have an exciting abortion story. I didn't have an exact moment, but I saw woman after woman at the time. I was 18, 19 years old. These were my peers, and it just broke my heart. And I think at a naive level, I couldn't believe that this went on in the United States of America. And it goes on in a very conservative place, in a nice neighborhood, and all of that. And so that's how I got very, very involved. Got to know Abby when she started volunteering for Planned Parenthood, and then we both eventually worked and then led opposing organizations. We did media interviews against one another's points, and she, to me, was the nice one. Her boss, who is portrayed in her movie Unplanned, they sort of cleaned her up in the movie, but Hollywood they were generous. But Mary Lisa and I could have had our little kids and probably seen Abby or Doug in the grocery store and kind of given an awkward wave, but it wouldn't have been a big deal. That would have been fine. May have talked even, who knows, or laughed that we saw each other because we're used to being divided by a fence. But if I saw Abby's boss, we would have left. I would have taken my kids away because she was crazy. And crazy is just, you just know it when you see it, when you hear it. And we did that a lot in front of that facility, but Abby wasn't in that category. And I think that made her vulnerable in the positive sense, because she would talk to us and she would treat us like we were human at certain times. And that's not what Planned Parenthood employees should do. They should go in and do their job and ignore the crazies outside, and that's an effective way to run an abortion facility, but they didn't do that. And so fortunately, we built this rapport with her. I never thought she was going to convert. I didn't foresee anything. There was one time she used the word conversion. It's in her book, and I thought, who uses that unless it's someone, somewhat buried in the back of your mind? But I think that's very important as we have to humanize the baby, to wake up people participating in this horrific evil. We also have to humanize ourselves to the workers, that we're not lunatics and that we actually do care about them, because the abortion industry doesn't. And we can win out with time. But that's kind of how I first got involved.
So when you were talking to Abby, was this when you started 40 Days for Life, or was this before?
It was before.
So it began before, and then it grew into a 40 Days for Life.
Yes, it began before, and then over time, our local organization, the Coalition for Life, we bought the house next door to her abortion facility, and that our hope in that was that we would offer free pregnancy tests, and women would come over, and they did. But we never imagined, I think it was only 2 or 3 months after we opened that Abby came over. And that was just obviously the grace of God. But we never would have foreshadowed how her conversion would not just, I think, change the dynamic of the pro-life movement at a very important time in the pro-life movement, but lead to hundreds of workers that she herself would sort of drag out with her through her story.
What's interesting though is that, and you kind of see this in the film, although, let me just say, the book is better than the movie.
Yes, as it always is.
As it always is. Because you get a lot more detail.
Except for Jaws. Jaws the movie is better than Jaws the book. There's exceptions.
But The scene where on my first day where I go to volunteer and I come out and I'm far overdressed, which was true, to be a volunteer. That scene where I come out and Mary Lisa is there talking to me, that scene actually did happen. A lot of people are like, oh, how true is the movie or whatever. I mean, there, of course there's liberties in film and stuff like that. That scene actually did really happen, except it did not happen with the fence in between us. So when we worked at the clinic, on days that we performed surgical abortions, the staff had to park off-site. We had to park over by the cable company, and we had to walk on the sidewalk, with the people that were praying, right? We had to walk on that sidewalk where they were all standing. And, we were told, ignore them, don't talk to them, whatever. Well, I was new. That was my first day, And on my very first day, which I think this is kind of, I don't know, almost like foreshadowing what was going to happen in my life. But on that very first day that I went to volunteer, Mary Lisa was there. And that conversation did actually really happen, but it did not happen with a fence in between us. It happened face to face. And I walked out, she started talking to me, and I walked out from around the fence, and we were walking down the sidewalk together. And she just kept up with me, right? Because I was like trying to kind of ignore her. And she just kept up with me and kept walking with me. And I don't know why I blurted out to her that day that I had had an abortion. But she did say, something about this being an abortion clinic. And I said, well, I know I've had an abortion. And that was not something I had shared with really anybody. I mean, that had been like a secret that I had held close to me because I did not want anybody to know that I had an abortion, but I just kind of blurted it out to her. And she just kind of stopped, which then made me stop because she had been fiercely keeping up with me, right?
Not easily done,
And
I think. Keeping up with you, heavy.
yeah, she had been really huffing it next to me, And she kind of stopped, and then that made me stop. And she just said, I'm so sorry that you went through that. And I, just kind of, was like, no, it's fine. I made the choice. It was fine. But that was really disarming to me that she had, number one, really tried to pursue me in that conversation, but that she wasn't the stereotype that I believed her to be, right? That when I shared with her that I'd had an abortion, she wasn't like, well, of course, you big murderer, of course, that's why you're here. But that she was kind and that she was almost sympathetic to that position. And that really changed my mind sort of about who I believed her to be. And it took years, of course, for me to leave, but I do think that it did make me vulnerable in a sense, even from that very first day that I worked there, because it helped me to see the people outside on the sidewalk. It helped me to see them differently, just from that very first day, from that very first interaction.
And would you say like that was, is there a spiritual element to it perhaps, like the Holy Spirit? Like you said, you've never told anyone before. What in the world would have prompted you to tell Mary Lisa that?
I don't know. She was nice and had bouncy blonde hair and just good hair, good thick hair.
Very important.
Number one rule pro-lifers, look attractive.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. Mary Lisa's had great hair forever.
Great hair, super cute.
Yeah.
I don't know, she was just nice. I would say if you're gonna go on the sidewalk, don't be weird. She wasn't weird.
Rule number 2, don't be weird.
She looked nice, she looked attractive, she was young. She looked more like a peer to me. And she just was very kind. I don't really know how to explain it. She was very kind. She had a very kind, just aura to her, you know, and very kind eyes. And I did not know her. That was the first time I'd ever seen her before in my life. But for me to just kind of blurt that out to her, it took me by surprise that I even said it to her. But it was almost like there was a piece about her that I thought, I can safely say this to her. And that's what we want to be as pro-lifers. We want to be safe people, that people that are opposed to us know that they can come to us and that we are going to be safe. We're going to be a refuge for them. No matter what they tell us, they're not going to be attacked, right?
Yeah. Now, Shawn, 40 days for life, ideally 24 hours for full 40 days. Now, that is an intense level of prayer. And first of all, we know it's a spiritual battle, so I won't ask you why you decided to pray, but why a full 24 hours? What made you think that there would be benefit to praying when the clinic was closed, or even in the wee hours of the night, or the morning rather, when probably no one is going to see you? Why not just pray from home? What was the logic there?
Well, because prayer was not just a talking point, but an actual powerful tool to end abortion. And the 24 hours was inspired because we were just desperate and we were losing volunteers and abortions were going up. And so now, 40 Days for Life's been done in 1,700 cities, and every city has the option of 12 hours or 24 hours, and a little under half actually do 24 hours. And I think it's that dedication that you can do anything for 40 straight days. And are you going to kind of go all in? And so that has really helped 40 Days for Life spread around the world. We have many cities now through 40 Days for Life 365 that do cover all the business hours of an abortion facility or an abortion referral facility, which is detrimental to the bottom line of a local facility. But I think that we were talking earlier about a lot of the insanity going on in our country, where we see almost like pro-life politicians embarrassed that the Supreme Court corrected their own error and overturned Roe v. Wade. We certainly see what's going on in Canada, and you have it very difficult. As much as it's easy to joke and to say, the government's nuts, and they are. Your government is nuts. And but so is ours. But it's important, and both our government and your government talk down to us. They treat us like we're idiots, whether it's, we won't go through the litany of issues, but there's a number of things. And you can't have a country where you have a government or a bureaucracy talking to their own people like they're morons when they're not. And that is very, very important. And with abortion, we are pro-science, we are pro-woman, it's common sense. My 8-year-old son knows that life begins at conception. We have it on film. This isn't a difficult thing apologetically. It's very difficult spiritually. And so prayer has to be the foundation. It's not nice, it's not neat, it's not, add your ethics or add your prayer or add your fasting. I think it's our only effective tool. It sharpens us. We need it, first and foremost, because if we're not taking care of our own souls, we're no good to anybody or society at large. But it's so powerful as a country, and it doesn't take a lot of us. Ruth actually said this beautifully last night at the candle vigil. It just didn't take a lot to close the abortion facility in New Brunswick. It didn't take a lot to close a lot of abortion facilities across the United States and England and here and throughout Latin America. It takes a few people who are dedicated. We've never had where the majority of people are on the side of God. We have this fantasy that history was just so perfect, and parts of it were. Everybody knew if they were a girl or a boy. But today, I think that the absurdity that we see and the division that we see makes people pray more, drives them more toward God for those who still believe in God. It can strengthen their faith, but it also gives clarity. There was a lot of gray area in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and even the 90s, and that's gone. It's pretty clear. Oh, I have 8 kids. Abby has 8 kids, and I'm sure you and Doug get it. We get it all the time, like how, especially when you're announcing to certain relatives who you could care less for, and they're like, "You're having another one," it's just.
Don't you know how that happens?
Yes, yeah.
We know.
It's crazy. Mary Lisa's got great hair.
Good at it.
And we like it.
But
We're good at it.
All right, we got to move on. But it's like, how could you raise kids in a society now or a culture now? And I think it's easier. I feel worse for my parents who are baby boomers, definitely for the World War II generation when, they came home from the war, they had children, and then society, there was just an upheaval of insanity in the 60s and 70s. We don't really have that. We've had a consistent downward spiral culturally. And so we know what we're dealing with. There are no surprises. And that is what we can always say, I can't believe now they're doing this. But when we acknowledge what's going on in the world with honesty, it gives clarity. And I think clarity always can draw us closer to God, but the foundation has to be prayer.
I've read your book, Abby, and I've watched Unplanned, and I saw your documentary, and I've read, almost all your books except for one, Shawn. So with all of that insight, I sort of feel like I can safely say it's almost like God has used you two as foils to one another, because you were on parallel paths with doing opposite things for the longest time. Like, you both have 8 kids, and as I recall, you were both pregnant at the same time, you and Mary Lisa, and you lived in the same area. I think I recall you saying you knocked on Abby's door once.
It was another lady's door. It was another lady's. Okay. It was the lady that recruited Abby.
Yes. So like you were in close proximity to one another. So how did that affect you, Abby, when you finally had your moment of clarity, when you saw an ultrasound-guided abortion and you went, oh no? Did that affect you at all? Did that bring you to Coalition for Life's door? Is that you knew them in some way? How did that affect you at all? Like, how is that your first response to go to someone that for years you've seen as the enemy?
Yeah, so I think the only reason that I knew I could go to them was because they had made it so known over the years that they would be willing to help me, because the abortion industry is an industry that is driven by fear. So they do a really good job to instill fear in their employees. So every 6 months, the FBI came into our facility and, would tell us, how dangerous our work is and how the pro-life movement is trying, to kill us. And how we don't need to take the same route home every day because certainly people are following us, and remind us about doctors that have been killed and all this kind of stuff. The police came in, once a quarter. We did bomb sweeps in our facility once a month. We did arson drills. The marshals came in and did training with us. So it's a constant sense of fear. Like, we are in a war. We are in a war against the people that are out there on the sidewalk and beyond. And that there's always an attack waiting for us. That there's always someone waiting for us around the corner, waiting to strike. And so I think that if there hadn't been, if they hadn't been out there constantly reaching out, constantly talking to us, and I will say, I was intentionally targeted by a woman named Elizabeth who, she came and showed up every day when I got to work. She knew that, Abby's going to show up at 7:30 every day. I'm going to be there at 7:30 welcoming her when she comes to the clinic. And she did that intentionally, trying to develop a relationship with me. And I didn't realize that at the time, but it annoyed me that she was so nice to me. And it annoyed me that she was there every flipping day when I got to work. And so she was there, and it annoyed me that they were nice because, I remember driving up one time and my registration sticker was about to run out on my car. And this guy's like, "Oh, good morning, Abby. I just want to remind you your registration's about to run out." And I'm like, "Shut up." I'm like, Stop trying to be helpful, And so, Elizabeth was there every single day, just trying to befriend me and trying to get to know me and praying for me and telling me that she was praying for me. And that was just grinding me. And so if she hadn't have been there, if there hadn't have been a constant presence, that's why I think being out there every day, not just 80 days a year, right? But picking up the ball and being there 365 days a year and showing the abortion workers, showing the women going in to have abortions, showing the industry, we're not just here 40 days out of the year. We're not just here 80 days out of the year, but we're here every single day. We're committed every single day to doing this. We're not just going to go away. It's not just going to be business as usual at day 41. But we're going to be here every day. That sends a real message. We didn't have that ability to be like, "Oh, okay, well, we're just going to make it 40 days. And then on day 41, they're going to be gone." That wasn't the case. They never left. They were never out of our sight. But that also sent a message to us that when I wanted to leave, they were going to be there. And so I think if that hadn't have been the case, I wouldn't have known where to turn to. I wouldn't have known where to go. And so even though I was nervous to go to them, even though I didn't know what they were going to say, because they had every right to look at me and go, "You've been rude," right? Like, "You've been a jerk to us over the past 8 years, and we don't want to help you," right? Like, "You're on your own. You've made your bed. Now you can go lay in it," right? They had every right to say that to me, but they didn't. They opened the door and they welcomed me, and they showed me the heart of Christ. And they didn't have to do that, but they did. And that is what we ought to be to everyone as pro-lifers. We have to show people who Jesus is. We have to welcome them in. Because we may be the only Jesus that they see. And if we aren't a good representation, we may be the only witness that they ever see. And if we screw it up, we're going to be held accountable for that.
So we almost, in a way, need to humanize ourselves as much as the babies.
Yeah.
Because you were taught to dehumanize us as well, like pro-lifers, they're your enemy.
Well, it is a cycle of dehumanization.
And abuse, I think, because one thing I've noticed about abusive relationships, I've had friends who've been in some, is that they like to isolate you from anyone who might help you. And it sounds like what Shawn and his fellow volunteers were able to do was build a relationship with you in spite of that cycle of abuse and isolation, that you were able to go to them.
Yeah, so we send postcards in to every abortion clinic around the United States. They hear from us once every 4 to 5 days. Every clinic in the United States, every abortion clinic is getting a mailer from us in some way. And one of them that we sent in February was like, break up with your toxic relationship with the abortion clinic, because it is a very it's like a very abusive relationship. There's even some, particularly in independent abortion facilities, so I mean not Planned Parenthood clinics, but other independent providers, the doctors will intentionally loan some of the employees that they give a lot of information to, so kind of like their right-hand employees, they will loan them significant amounts of money, like $10,000, $15,000. And these are the people that they're kind of letting in on all of their secrets, right? So the people that are seeing the worst things in the industry, the worst things in the clinic, they'll loan them significant amounts of money so that when these workers want to leave, they'll use that as leverage against them. And they'll say, well, if you leave, I'll sue you because I loaned you all this money. And if you can't pay me back, then if you leave, I'm going to sue you and take you to court. And these workers are like, well, I can't pay you back $15,000 right now. So then they're like, well, then you better not leave or else I'm going to see you in court. And so it is this toxic relationship. It is like being in a very abusive relationship with your employer. And so, you know, giving these workers the ability to have freedom to leave and to say, don't worry about it. Like, if they sue you, we wish they would. That's what we always say. Like, we wish they would sue you because the discovery process would be beautiful. We would love to go into discovery with your former employer. And so, but having their backs like that and being able to say, we've got you, no matter what, we've got you. It's really freedom. It's helping them find freedom from the abortion industry. And that's what the Coalition for Life was able to do for me, was just to be able to say, like, we've got your back no matter what. And truly, I mean, you know, Shawn went to pick up a vacuum for me. I left my vacuum in the abortion clinic, and, you know, Shawn went and picked it up for me.
It was very awkward.
Shawn.
It was your friend who still worked there, and you said, I left my vacuum cleaner. And I'm like, I could care less about your vacuum cleaner. And you're like, no, I really want it. Go there. She's going to meet you at the corner. So she'll be nameless, but she met me at the corner, and I took her vacuum, and I remember thinking, all right, we got to back off on how much we're helping these workers. This is getting a little overboard.
As much as I want to hear more crazy stories like this, we're getting close to Q&A now. So I think I'd be remiss, just in the minute before we go to that, not to first congratulate you. Roe v. Wade was overturned. And you've seen... You've both seen incredible successes in your own organizations, and then on a federal level, you had this horrible law overturned. In light of that, and both of you say amazing things, so keep it very brief. What would you say is the number one piece of advice you have for Canadians to invoke similar success in creating change here? Okay. Go ahead.
Don't give up. Keep going. Ignore as much of the noise and never apologize for your pro-life position. The Canadian babies have no voice but yours. Your situation is bad, but it's not impossible. So don't get discouraged. Certainly don't fall into the sin of despair. And go to work. Go to work where you can go to work, which is at the grassroots level, which is in Parliament where you can. Don't give up on those avenues. And trust God.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say yes to everything Shawn said, and I would also say to not put all of your faith in the law. Yeah, we had a victory in the United States. We overturned Roe, but look at what's happened now in the United States. Late-term abortion is up higher than it's ever been. Chemical abortion is up higher than it's ever been. The abortion rate, period, is up higher than it's been in the past decade, now that Roe's been overturned. We have now states that are, they're codifying abortion in their state constitution up through all 9 months of pregnancy. We've never had that before. And now we have it since Roe's been overturned. So don't believe that the law is going to be your savior from abortion. Don't believe that political candidates are going to be your savior against abortion. Abortion is child sacrifice. The Bible says there is nothing new under the sun. Abortion is the same spirit. What we see today is the same spirit of Baal. It's the same demonic spirit of Molech that we see in the Old Testament. We are still fighting those spirits today. We just call it something more palatable. We call it choice. We call it reproductive rights. We call it reproductive justice, but it is the same spirit that we see in the Old Testament that we are seeing that is across our land today. Friends, no law is going to save you from demonic spirits. The only thing that will save us is the power of Jesus Christ. And the only thing that is going to overcome those demonic spirits is going to be prayer, it's going to be fasting, and it is going to be activism, God using you as an instrument. And so continue to be active. People say to me all the time, Abby, but I am praying. I pray from my recliner every day. Listen to me. If your prayer life, if you have a serious prayer life, then that prayer life should move you to action. And if it is not, if there is not a fire in your belly when it comes to the barbarism of abortion, then I'm going to question the seriousness of your prayer life. Your prayer life should move your feet to action. And we need everyone to be out there, be activated by this cause.
Now, we will be taking questions for Shawn and Abby. And while I'm waiting for the questions to come in, I just want to wholeheartedly second what you've both said about not giving up and don't put your faith in the law or the government, because we have but one Savior, one person who can get us out of this. And I know that from Clinic 554 closing down. Shawn touched on that. In Fredericton, New Brunswick, for years, in politics, the battle was raging. Who is going to fund this clinic? Taxpayers? Well, New Brunswick said no, and pro-choicers lobbied hard against that. But in the end, what shut down that clinic wasn't politics. It might have helped that they didn't get much funding, which is great, but what shut down the clinic was a handful, I do mean a handful, 10 or 15 brave souls who prayed for hours, sometimes alone. And it took one final campaign to get that clinic shut down. Numbers are irrelevant, really, because God is beyond anything. His power is incomparable. And the fewer there are of us, the greater he gets to manifest his glory. That is our advantage as Canadians, is that no one can ever say Canada does not have God on the side of the pro-life movement, because Canada has so few people right now being active in the pro-life movement. Every day we fight is a miracle because God is on our side, clearly. Now we have our first question, Abby. As someone that has had an abortion and being an abortion worker, how did you forgive Planned Parenthood and the abortionist that killed your child?
I didn't have any anger toward the abortionist. Well, the first abortion I had was a surgical abortion. I don't know who that abortionist was. I don't remember much about that abortion, actually. I think that's kind of a grace. But I don't have any anger toward them. I made the decision to have the abortion, so I take accountability for that. That was my decision. It was my sin, not theirs. They have to take accountability for what they've done, and I take accountability for what I've done. So I don't have any anger toward them for what they did. For my own part in abortion, the second abortion I did was was a chemical abortion, a pill abortion. That was, also, I made the decision to do it. The doctor that oversaw it was actually a doctor I worked with for years at the clinic. I don't have any anger toward him. I actually have a lot of pity toward him. And but yeah, I don't feel anger toward those that work in the industry at all. I don't feel I don't have any of that. I just feel like my healing was, it was slow, it was kind of messy, it was all done very publicly, which is, nobody's fault. That's what God laid out for me. And is it ideal? No, but God opened the door for me to do this work in a very specific way. And I think Shawn can attest to that too. I didn't want to do this. And Shawn didn't want me to do this. We didn't intend for me to come out, doors flying open and Abby Johnson to be the next pro-life speaker. That was not my intention at all. In fact, I had gotten another job for a doctor in town, and I was embarrassed by what I had done. I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to go on TV and talk about what I had done. I didn't want to talk about the fact that I had taken the lives of my children. In fact, my parents did not even know that I had had 2 abortions until it was time for Unplanned to go to print. And I had worked with Cindy, who was helping edit the book. I had worked with her, and we had worked on 2 different manuscripts of the book. One that talked about my abortions and one that didn't. Because I had not told my parents that I had had abortions. And finally, Tyndale, the publisher, called me and said, Abby, we've got to know what we're going to take to print because it's going to print tomorrow. And I had still not told my parents. And I had intended to tell them in person over and over and over again. And then you just, it never comes up, right? Like, by the way, it just never came up in conversation. And so finally I called my mom. My dad was traveling for work. I called my mom and I said, Mom, I've been wanting to have this conversation in person. I'm so sorry I didn't. But, I've had 2 abortions. And my mom, I didn't know what she was going to say. And my mom said, and I said, but my book is going to print tomorrow. I need to know if it's okay with you if I talk about it. Because if you're not okay with it, I'm going to completely honor that. I need you to make the decision because this is something that is going to affect my entire family. This is going to affect our entire family. And if you're embarrassed by this, my grandparents are going to read this. And so if you think they don't want people to know that I've had an abortion, I respect that. Your church members are going to read this. Everybody's going to know that your daughter had an abortion. So if you don't want that getting out, I respect it. But I need you to make the decision. And my mom said, Abby, you have to tell your entire story. That's the only thing that's honest. And you've made a commitment to be honest. And you have to tell the whole story. And my mom said, Abby, that actually is the only thing that makes sense to me. She said, now that you've told me you've had abortions, all this makes sense. She said, I knew there had to be a reason that you kept fighting for this. And she said, this makes sense now. And so we went to print and told the story, but I had no intention, I had no desire of ever coming forward with my story. And so doing this was really just walking in God's will. And it was very messy, it was very complicated. I wouldn't wish it on anybody else. I did it very clumsily, but I did it, and it was hard. It was hard to heal in front of everybody. But honestly, it took a lot of practice to heal. I had to wake up every day and make a decision. Am I going to live in this gift that God has given me? Am I going to allow him to take my past sin and turn it into something beautiful? Or am I going to drink too much wine today and wallow in the past and allow Satan to call me by my past sin? What am I going to do? And eventually, day after day of choosing God, eventually I didn't have to make the choice anymore. Eventually it just became so easy. I couldn't imagine not choosing him day after day. And just walking in forgiveness became the only thing I wanted to do. But it wasn't easy. It's not easy healing from an abortion. It's not easy healing from, knowing that I've helped to facilitate over 22,000 abortions. That's not easy. But choosing to not accept God's forgiveness is actually a sin as well. Choosing to not accept God's forgiveness, that's pride. That's saying that, God, you're not big enough to forgive me of my sin. And that in itself is a sin. And so having to accept that and having to accept his forgiveness, it became easy, but it did take practice.
Thank you. Now we have... Question for you now, Shawn. As a longtime pro-life advocate, does a spiritual battle ever affect you personally? And if so, what spiritual practices do you take for protection?
Well, yeah, of course it does. I think that it's not complicated. I love being a Catholic. I was very blessed to have great Catholic formation, to great Catholic priests, very spoiled in that. My siblings, their kids, it's awesome. So it's a little bit of a bubble in a good sense, and I think you need that at a very healthy level. You can't just run around and complain about the world all day. It's not good for you. It's not good for the world. So I think that the daily mass, when you can make it for Catholics, for sure. Daily rosary with your family, rosary with your kids. Our family rosary, I have 8 kids from 4 to 18, and growing up and having little kids, you say the rosary with your family, and it's somewhere between the most beautiful scene on earth and a Saturday Night Live skit. It's just mayhem, and it's you just go with it. You just keep saying Hail Marys, and somebody wanders off. You don't know what they're doing. They're asking where their shoe is. It's just, that's part of the joy. But I think also I go on silent retreats. I go on men's silent retreats with the Aemilius Christi Fathers, who are fantastic. There's Opus Dei retreats. I've done those. That's essential. And having a regular spiritual director who I have and who knows me well. And that's just very, very important. And, the spiritual warfare we have to be aware of, but we also have to know that we win and that Christ wins, and we can't live a paranoid life or a life in a constant state of emergency. The Lord is not in noise, as the saints say, and we do need to be still and know that he is God and take care of our own souls, go to confession, go to mass, pray for 30 minutes every morning when we get up, say the Liturgy of the Hours if you can, as a Catholic. Beautiful way to start your day. Read the spiritual, lives of the saints, switch it up, but get up every morning and spend 30 minutes in silence, and everything's going to work out that day. And when you don't do it, it's going to be hard. And when you do it, everything's going to be easier no matter what. And I think that sustains me for sure personally, not only doing pro-life work, and you know this, but just having 8 children, which is just, that's a lot. And just keeping up with our schedules and taking my wife out and buying her random flowers on like a Tuesday, and just maintaining a good life gives you direction. So many people are lost. And when you strive to live your faith, even if you stink at it and you fail, which we all do all the time, you're making progress and you're not lost. You're not lost. And there's a lot of people looking for meaning and value and love in our world, and it's very sad. We live in a very, very sad, wounded time. And so, yes is the answer to the spiritual warfare, but for us, for those of you that are Catholic, we just have this roadmap of 2,000 years and the practices of the saints, and we have absolutely no excuse, because there have been saints that are exactly like us. There have been saints that are a little out there. There have been saints that have been martyred. There have been saints that are impressive people. There have been saints that aren't impressive people. And from all different cultures and all different time periods in history. And so we're out of excuses on trying to relate how to live a Christian life in the time that we live in. Because in the end, our cross, in my view, and the spiritual attacks that we have is white martyrdom. We don't have a lot of red martyrdom. We may. That was very common at different times of history of the church. But right now it's the white martyrdom. And I think that dealing with that, Walker Piercy has a great quote where he says, the great fear is not that the nukes may come. The great fear is that realizing the nukes may never come. And we just have to get up in the morning and live our life and be faithful to God. And so, not living in a state of emergency and trusting God, and I think being patient with yourself and patient with those you love, it goes a long way in today's times.
Well, we're down to our last question. I think you've indirectly already answered this one, Shawn, so perhaps you can start, Abby, which was, how do you handle the criticism of being a pro-lifer, and what are your tips on standing firm?
I mean, I just don't care what anybody else thinks of me, so I mean, that's kind of it. I don't do this for anybody except the Lord. So as long as he's pleased with me, then that's really all I care about. I mean, that's kind of the short answer. It's hilarious, actually, when people on social media, I post something and people are like, I'm so disappointed in you. I'm like, you have no idea how little I care about your opinion.
We are so different in that, Abby.
At all. I think we should all care less about other people, what other people think about us. Who cares? I think that God blesses us with, this is what I tell my counseling clients anyway. So welcome to our session, your counseling session. I tell my clients that come to counseling with me, I think God blesses us with people on an island. And I feel very blessed that I have, my husband on my island, and I have my 8 children on my island, and those are the people I love and care about the most, and my parents. Those are the people I love and care about most on this earth. And I feel very blessed that I've been given so many of them, because some people only have 1 or 2 people on their island. And everybody else that comes and goes, is they're really just kind of transient in my life, and their opinion of me just doesn't matter. I'm here because God, he gave me a vocation to be a wife and a mother and to serve him. And so as long as I'm doing those things well, that's really all I care about. And everything else, social media, speaking engagements, all these other things, gosh, that is really, really, really far down the line in comparison to what God has given me, the work that God has given me to do. And that is to be a wife, to be a mother, and to be a believer. And that's it. And if I'm doing those three things right, then I just have to assume that everything else is going to fall into place. And if somebody else doesn't like it, I don't care. So I mean, my suggestion is, if you are a person who really cares about what other people think of you, you take that to the Lord, and he will relieve you of that burden. He will relieve you of that pressure, because he really only wants you to be concerned about his opinion, truly and honestly. And the world, the rest of the world and what they think, really, he wants that to fade away from your mind, and just to really be focused on him. And I think what Shawn said about being in daily mass, receiving the Eucharist, going to confession, being in the sacraments, that helps us focus less on the world and focus more on him. And that's what he wants.
Yeah. I think this is a good question, and I have that category too of like, I'm not big on social media, so I don't follow a lot of that, but getting criticized by people who hate us because we're pro-life, that's just what it is. Who cares? But I do think it's important to have people in your life, multiple people, who can tell you that you're an idiot. And, getting to be in the pro-life movement, getting to lead an organization, it's a tremendous honor. But with that comes a lot of undeserved praise. And so when people criticize me, or insult me or point out something, I think about whether it's true or not. And sometimes it is. And that, I think that's important, and we need that, because we get so many different, way to go, and it's awesome, and all that's great, and keeps you going, and we all need that in our lives, no matter what your career is, what your job is, what your vocation is. It helps when somebody says, hey, you did a good job. I'm not just throwing sunshine up your rear, but you did a good job. Poor priests prepare sermons all week, and then we're like, thank you, Father, see you later, and we leave Mass. But I do think it's important to when the criticism is well thought out, and it's not some crazy person with pink hair screaming at you on the street, but to ask, I probably did screw that up, or did I screw it up? And to evaluate that. I mean, I was privileged to get to lead a local pro-life group at 22 years of age, and poor Abby, when she walked into our office, she had like a 26-year-old that was going to help her. It was like the word. We know, we don't totally know what we're doing at 40 Days for Life now, but we know a lot now, 20 years later than we knew in 2009 when she walked in. And so for me, I know it's been a maturing process, a growing process, and I have a great wife who tells me that stunk or that was good. And I think that's very important, and it's very important being an Irish Catholic to marry somebody from German descent.
Well, thank you both so much. I wish we could keep asking you questions. It's an absolute goldmine. And I think you've given us all a lot to think about and hopefully put into action. As you said, Abby, really, you said faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. So I think we should all give you a large round of applause as thank you for coming here and sharing that with us today.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It's always a bit strange to see yourself on camera, but it was good to hear what Abby and Shawn had to say and think it over again. I'm really quite struck by how much their faith has been integral to all that they've done. And we need that in Canada because, as Abby rightly points out, we can't rely on the government to be protecting our children, and not even just in the womb, but even in our own homes. If we aren't speaking to our children about why we are pro-life, and if we aren't acting to defend the lives of innocent children, then they become vulnerable to manipulation and coercion. And that's something that we can only defend against through faith and through our actions. I don't know, Matt, what did you think?
Well, I thought the whole show, the whole conversation was just filled with such like so many gold nuggets. I know even the concept that Abby talked about of her, how she was kind of like lured into the abortion industry, and how she didn't go into it thinking like I'm a feminist, and no, she actually went into it thinking she's helping women. And she didn't even have any really good pro-life arguments in her own life, in her own upbringing. She was Christian and whatnot. But it seems like she was targeted. And those are the kind of people they want working for the abortion industry, people who aren't really aware of the situation, of the issue. And yeah, that was quite moving. And then also just the relationship that Shawn and Abby had developed over the years. And one thing that really stuck out for me is how the reason why Abby was even open to talking to Shawn and his wife and the other volunteers is because of how nice they were to her, right? They didn't yell and scream. They were nice to her. They prayed for her. They talked to her like a human being. And I think that really allowed her to kind of, just to be more open, more receptive to what they were about to say and what they were telling her. And also even when Shawn mentioned how, speaking to a Canadian audience, he said like Canadian children in the womb have no one fighting for them except the people in this room and except the pro-life movement in Canada. And I thought that's a really huge, call to action. Like, let us not forget that the law isn't there to protect them. Our politicians and government don't even want to talk about them, right? The children in the womb. Our media doesn't want them, ignores them. So who's there? Who's out there in Canada fighting for the unborn? No one except the pro-life movement. That's it. That's all we have.
Yeah. And if we're too afraid to go out there, who is? And I was very moved by what Shawn said in answer to the question about, well, how do you handle all the criticism? Because that was when, especially when I was beginning, and sometimes it still crops up now, was something that I've struggled with. I did not like exposing myself to the vile language and accusations on the street. And how I motivated myself was simply to say that whatever they do to me, it's nothing compared to what's happening to children in the womb. So I could do it for them. And I had to make it very tangible. An abstract concept wasn't enough. I had to actually hold a little model of a fetus in my hands and go, I'm doing it for them. And that was what gave me the courage and the strength. But I realized, listening to Shawn, that what really enables that is humility, which is not a connection I'd made before. But he said, just ask yourself, is what they're saying true? And I think that's what allowed him and his wife to be so kind to people like Abby who are working in the abortion industry, is they were humble enough not to view themselves as superior to these individuals, but to see them as lost in Satan's kingdom, the same way they were before Christ redeemed them and continues to sanctify them through the Holy Spirit. They had that sense of humility. So when people are throwing accusations at them, they don't immediately either disappear because they don't want to deal with that, and they don't let it get them down, because they just ask themselves, is it true? And if it is, then they're going to have the humility to try and improve it. And if it's not, then they rest entirely on the foundation of Christ, our rock. And so through doing that, they're able not only to be outside protecting these children, but to even witness to the people who are killing these children.
That's right. That's right. And both of them were very clear in expressing their faith in Christ, and how God, everything is through, they do everything through God, right? With God, because without him, everything goes wrong, right? You talk about humility. Without Christ, without God, then we allow ourselves to be kind of swallowed up by pride and by other sins, by egos, right? But with God, by ordering our life according to God's plan, we kind of give everything to him. We surrender everything to him. So even all the insults, all the trials and all the obstacles that we may face as a pro-life movement, if we just surrender all of that to God, man, that is such freedom. Because then we just do what we got to do, right? And the rest, we leave it all up to God. And through that, we allow God to work and the Holy Spirit to work through us and touch the hearts of all these people, especially if they are either extremely pro-abortion or they have suffered abortions and they have trauma, or they have all these other things kind of blocking them from the truth. Through God, we are able to reach out to these people in the same way that Shawn and his wife were able to reach out to Abby. So I thought that was really awesome. And man, oh man, like what a great night. The Rose Dinner, if you haven't been to the Rose Dinner, folks, please try to come out next year. And the National March for Life next year, actually put this in your calendars already today. The next National March for Life in 2025 will be on Thursday, May the 9th. And after the March for Life on Parliament Hill, we always gather at the Rose Dinner. So just put it in your calendar, save the date now, circle it in, and start planning for your trip next year. And any closing comments, Ruth?
Just the one, I think. Abby often speaks of the dangers that pro-lifers can fall into, while we're speaking of humility, of needing someone to blame, and so all the ire gets directed towards abortion workers. And we don't know how they got into this life, but you're just reminded, listening to it, that there's a certain irony in the hatred that we level towards them, which is that he who hates his brother or his sister in his heart is a murderer. And so the very act of despising these individuals as if we are better proves that we're really not. And I think that we just need to constantly be coming from a place of humility and prayer, because we're never going to end this if we forget who the real enemy is. Exactly. And the real enemy, Christ defeated on the cross. We're just waiting till he comes back now.
That's it. And we're just his tools of mercy, his tools for charity and love. And that's, I guess, the mission for everyone in the pro-life movement, for all of us here at Campaign Life, everyone at the National March for Life, and for all of you listening, tuning into tonight's special presentation. Just remain humble, remain focused on Christ, and let him do the work through you. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us for tonight's special presentation of Unplanned Friendship, featuring Abby and Shawn. This will be the last Life on Film for the next few months. We're going to take a bit of a break over the summer months, but we hope to come back with some more special presentations and features in the fall. But in the meantime, a huge thank you to everyone who came out to the National March for Life, to all the donors, the sponsors, everyone who prayed for the success of the March for Life. You can go and check out all the wonderful highlight videos that were produced by the wonderful folks at Dunn Media through the direction of Kevin Dunn. You can watch everything on our YouTube channel, the one that you're watching right now, as well as marchforlife.ca. Have a great night. Stay connected, stay active, stay humble, and we'll see you soon in a few months on the next Life on Film. Take care and God bless.